Good evening, it's Robert Sidell. Welcome you to the Dream, no, sorry to say Dream Power. That was the name of the show once. The Gateway Show. And it's a great pleasure to be with you here on this Sunday evening. It's on live every Sunday evening from 6 to 7 p.m. I want you to know that it's a great pleasure to be here with you. This show's broadcasting on the number one talk station in Las Vegas. And it's also simulcasting on Facebook right now. And so you can listen to this live both on the radio and also live on Facebook. Plus, you can also pick up a recording later on too. So on Facebook and also on YouTube. Just type in podcasts and Miracle or Gateway Podcast or Gateway Robert Sidell. Any of those things, it'll pull you up to my channel. And then you can subscribe to it. You'll be able to listen to it anytime you feel like. Hey, Debbie, how you doing tonight? It's a great pleasure to be here on this Sunday evening, a pretty day here in Las Vegas. I went to the art festival out in Summerlin. It was a downtown Summerlin, very fun to see all the different crafts and different things. I like to get little foods. There's certain honeys, different kinds of honey I like, things like that. But it's just a great privilege and a pleasure to be here with you. Every day is a gift, and tonight I want to focus on a simple, but very advanced, and also difficult concept, which is how to deal with problems that have no apparent solution. I think when we look out in the world, we can easily see lots of things like that. And the whole situation in the Middle East is like that. There's no simple, apparent solutions. If there were, they would have been come up with a long time ago. So what do we do when we're faced with problems? And you can look all over this world, not just in one place, all over the world and see problems that have no apparent solution. And it's why some people become pessimistic about the condition of the world, because they're trying to find solutions to make it better. But just as often, the solutions to make it better, to try to make it better, make things worse. So where does that lead any of us? Where are we headed? Oh, okay. Andy Hanegar says, or go to Attorney Robert Sidell and pray for a solution. Okay, Andy, that's the whole show. I'll just complete it right now. Go to Attorney Robert Sidell or pray, or go to pray for a solution. Maybe both sometimes. That's what I do all the time. So actually, let me go ahead. I'm going to put on a little bit of music here. I've got a couple different kinds of music I put on here now. Let's see here. Let's see here. I think those will come on. So let me tell you a story from the Bible where they were dealing with a similar problem. Somebody came to Jesus asking him what he had to do to find God's love and salvation. And this guy says, I give my money to charity. I do good things. He's referred to as a young rich man. And Jesus says, no, you must give up everything and follow me and just let it all go. Walk away. So, and the guy turned away and said, this is too hard. And so his disciples asked Jesus, they said, well, Jesus, they said, well, here's exactly what it says. Matthew chapter 19, verse 25. When the disciples heard this, they were greatly astonished and said, who then can be saved? If this young rich man who did all these good things, gave to the poor, took care of his parents, was a good person by every traditional standard, if that wasn't good enough, hello, Linda, then who could be saved? So they say to Jesus, I'll read it again. They were greatly astonished and said, well, who can be saved? If that guy's not good enough, who's good enough? And Jesus' answer in verse 26 is, he looked at them and said, with man this is impossible, but with God all things are possible. With man it is impossible. With God all things are possible. So the message I want to share with you tonight is that this answer was given to me very clearly. I had a client come in on my office this week. Very nice young family. I'm absolutely certain, without telling the story about it, is that they were divinely guided to me. And this man was an elder in his church, and we even shared a prayer together. And what we were both saying is that when you're brought to a place where you see no answer, then in that answer is only one answer, and the answer is God. And if you and I can remember, it's okay to not have an answer. I've been in situations in my life that had absolutely no answer. I felt absolutely trapped, so to speak. I don't know if you ever had that experience or not, but I had that experience in my life at one point. Actually, probably more than once, but at one time in a very significant way. It felt like my life could come to an end out of it. And what I came to the same realization that the only answer was God. Now, for me, by surrendering and surrendering and surrendering to God, I ended up getting to a new reality that was better than I'd ever been in. But it took some time, it took daily surrender and constant growth and stretching and being more than I'd ever been before. So what I want to say to you is, when we in the world are faced with situations like, for example, what's going on in the Middle East, the conflict they're having over there, the answer is generally not going to be what we think it is. Because if it was real simple, it would have already happened. And some of these problems have been going on literally thousands of years. So when we're faced with the appearance, and I say the appearance, of impossibility, then we have to remember that what Jesus said at that time. Yes, to man it is impossible. Yes, to man it is impossible. But to God all things are possible. So, strangely enough, when we encounter something that seems absolutely impossible, it's actually an opportunity to really surrender to God. Because you see, eventually we're brought to that place anyway. If we live long enough on this earth, we will realize at some point we will move beyond this life experience. We will no longer be living here. And again, that could seem like impossibility. Well, how do you handle that problem? But yes, to man that is impossible. Man doesn't know what to do about that. Man doesn't know how to handle that. But man has the ability to surrender that to God. And with God, there is an answer. And the answer is infinite, eternal, and perfect for us. So when we're confronted with things, I'm going to see if I can find it once. There was a beautiful little poem that summarizes. I wonder if I can find it. It's about coming to the end of a road. Okay, see if I can find this here. Yeah, maybe not. It's funny. Let's see. The basic idea is, let's see here. Well, I can't find it quick. Okay. Well, if I find it, I'll come to it in a little bit. The basic idea is this, my friends. If you come to a place where you see no way forward, one of two things is going to happen in your life. Either God will give you a bridge, or God will teach you how to fly. And it's that kind of faith. And it's the only faith that will ever free you and I. It's the only thing that will ever free us. One of the things when Jesus was speaking to the disciples, he said, in this world there will be trouble. Well, I thought a lot about that. What exactly does that mean? Well, most of us have lived in this world and encountered trouble enough times. My friend Andy, if he's still listening right now, he lost a whole country club to a hurricane. It was a very successful business, and it washed out to sea. That's trouble. And it led to a sudden change in his life. I'm only laughing because he kind of laughs about it now, because it's a story you have to laugh about, because there's no other good answer. He had a very successful business, and this huge hurricane came along and literally washed the business out to sea. And he wasn't even there when it happened. He had 4 or 5 buildings, and they were all washed out to sea, including this huge kitchen where they made their food and everything. So things happen sometimes that we see no answer to, no solution to. And at those moments, we always have a question and a choice and a challenge. Every one of us has this question, choice, and challenge. Will you just give up and assume that it's all hopeless? And see, to say it's hopeless on a human level is not a bad thing. So if you face some of that despair on a human level, that's okay. That's okay. Because that's innocent. That's a normal human response. That's the same thing the disciples were saying to Jesus. Well, Jesus, this is too hard. It's just too difficult. It's not possible for any of us. And Jesus said, yeah, that's right. It isn't possible for you. It is not possible for you. But it is possible for God. So each one of you, whatever is going on in your life, if you could begin to contemplate that your destiny might seem impossible to you, but it is possible to God. And what is that destiny? The destiny can be many, many different things. But part of your destiny, if you accept the grace of God, for those who accept Christ, is acceptance that there is a wonderful heaven, eternal blessing even after this life. And now I know there's lots of people in this day and age, even well-known people, think, oh, that's just sort of a fantasy or not really real. And yet it's funny because there's lots of other people, you can see it in near-death experiences, who have a very strong conviction of the reality of that. I've been very fortunate in my life. I've had several close people that have passed away from my parents and also two brothers. And at least in some of those cases, I absolutely had clear-cut communication from those people after they passed from this earth. And what I can tell you is they went on to a very good future. But see, to the logical mind, like the disciples said to Jesus, that seems impossible. How's it possible? How, when you no longer have your healthy body to live in, can you go on and be successful? How's that possible? And you know what? To man, that is impossible. Exactly what Jesus said. To man, that is impossible. But to God, all things are possible. Because you see, we live in a divine world. We don't understand it. We don't believe it sometimes. It doesn't seem real sometimes. But that doesn't change it from being real. And that's the miracle of creation. When you can begin to rest in that truth. When you can begin to rest that God has got it handled. That there are answers that we know not of. I'm going to go to a break. This is Robert Sidell. This is the Gateway Show. I'll be back in just a moment. I'm talking tonight about how to find answers to problems that appear to have no answers. So it's a good topic because it's something we're all brought to once in a while in our lives. So stay tuned. I'll be back in just a moment. This is Robert Sidell. So my friends, there's lots of times in my life where, I don't know if you've ever been in these times, and I've studied lots of spiritual traditions, where you may find yourself in what seems to be a dead end, or it seems like you're just boxed in with no opportunity, no possibilities forward. I guess like I said, I very clearly, in one particular phase of my life, I went through that. More than what would normally be the case. Way more. And it's like, what happened was, by continuous surrender to God, by continuous willingness to grow, by continued prayers, continued faith, what happened is God gradually and completely healed me and actually brought me to a much higher level of awareness, actually. That is actually the actual truth. Brought me to a much, much higher level of consciousness and awareness. Made possibilities available in my life that would not have existed at that time. So wherever you are, whatever's happening in your life right now, hello Ernie, how you doing? I want to just suggest to you that God is good, grace is real, miracles are real. There are answers to the things that are facing us, but they may not be apparent, they may not be obvious. And it's at those moments, what we want to do is surrender into God's infinite love. And say, God, and be willing to honestly admit to God, I don't have the answer. I don't know the answer. All right, have you ever been able to say that to God honestly? God, I don't have the answer. I don't know how these pieces of this puzzle fit together. I don't know how. If you can innocently and honestly say that, do you realize that you're at the verge of the ability to suddenly step into a much higher dimension of love and grace? Because when you admit that you of yourself cannot do something, then at that moment, you're given the opportunity to grow miraculously and beautifully. When you're given that opportunity. But you have to face that though. You have to face, I myself do not know how to get through this story. I don't know what the answers are. In your life, even right now, think about it. Do you on your own know how to handle what is going to happen to you after you leave this earth? Do you know how to make that happen? I don't think so. Other than through your faith in God. That's still faith. So when we face that kind of uncertainty, and that's just an extreme example, but maybe it's the best example. The question is, are you willing to encounter a miraculous dimension of God's love that could change your life forever? Forever. We're coming back from the radio right now, to the radio. Good evening, my friends. This is Robert Sidell. I welcome you back to the Gateway Show. Tonight I'm focusing on the topic on every Sunday night, 6 to 7 p.m. live. Also simulcasting on Facebook. And also you can listen to this as a podcast on YouTube. Just type in Sidell Podcast or Sidell Gateway Podcast, and you will get to it. So, and it has all these recordings on there. You can listen to them anytime. So wherever you are right now, my friends, in your life, the whole idea I'm going to present to you very simply is, and Jesus did talk about this during his life, when you're confronted with that which seems impossible, that's okay. Hello, Tim. I've seen you for a while. When you're presented with that which seems impossible, if you're willing to recognize that's not a source of despair, that's really an invitation to trust in God. It's an invitation to reach beyond your own logical mind. If you and I can reach beyond our own logical, reasoning, rational structure of thinking, then we can begin to find a possibility that we never could understand, but could be real in our lives. And one day we may realize that which we've been struggling with, which has burdened our hearts, which has seemed hopeless, suddenly is healed. How many times have you ever been sick and you maybe had a bad cold, maybe you had the flu, could be anything. You thought, there's no answer here. I see no answer. And you just feel like you're going to be sick forever. And then suddenly you wake up one day and you're feeling a lot better. Next thing you know, you're back feeling normal again. I think many of us have had that happen over and over and over again in our lives. How did that happen? We don't really know. Somehow our body's healed. Somehow we overcame. Somehow, through the miracle of creation, we were able to be healed. So whatever's going on in your life right now, I want to just direct you back to that same statement that Jesus made when the disciples were talking to him. Very simple. They came to him and said, after he was talking about what it takes to be righteous in God's eyes, and he said, when the disciples heard this, they were greatly astonished and said, who can be saved? In other words, what are we going to do? None of us are this good. And he looked at them and said, with man it is impossible. In other words, yeah, you're right. You are right. He goes, but with God all things are possible. That's Matthew 19:26. You can look that up just to remind yourself when you're facing a difficult situation. And I think we can look at many parts of our world and see that, whether it's in our political structure in our own country, whether it's in climate issues, whether it's in how people work those out, whether it's any area of your life. It may seem impossible. How are we going to work this out? And yes, it is impossible to man. But to God, all things are possible. And I'll tell you, I'm going to quote another Jewish man. I was quoting Jesus, who is Jewish, and his insights. And now what I'm going to do is quote for you from Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein says something almost the same. He says, no problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it. Let me read that back to you again. No problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it. Which is to say, I was one of my friends, as a matter of fact, Janet has this saying, who will be on the show later on. She calls it the spin cycle. How many of you have ever been in the spin cycle, where you just keep turning over the same problem over and over again in your mind, and you can't come up with an answer? Have any of you ever had that feeling? Have any of you ever had that feeling of a kind of hopelessness? You just keep turning over the same problem over and over and over again in your mind? I went through a whole phase in my life like that. It's kind of obsessional thinking. I couldn't find an answer. I'd always been able to find answers in my life to things, and this was one situation I could not find an answer to. And I had to just keep surrendering it to God over and over and over again. And then one day, I realized I was free. I was no longer stuck there. I had somehow been delivered from that place. And that's the miracle of creation on this earth. It could be anything in your life. You could have an addiction. You could have an addiction to alcohol or any other drug or any other circumstance. You could be addicted to a person. Sometimes people get addicted to people. You got all kinds of different addictions that we can have. Sometimes those addictions can be good. If it's your own spouse or whatever, but other times it may not be at all. So my friends, wherever you're at in your life, Linda just posted something here. Said she was in a spin for sure. Then recently she said she received the bridge that I spoke about. She was just hired as an employee after the manager saw my enthusiasm. As a member of doing what she loved and offered me the position. That's beautiful, Linda. That's a lot of fun. That's a great story. You have to call me about that. Call me and we'll talk more about it. So, as a matter of fact, if you felt like it and you wanted to call in right now, I think they could patch you in if you wanted to talk about it. Totally up to you. I don't even remember the number. It's 733-5968. If you wanted to give a call, 702-733-5968. You might want to do that right now, or you might not. But if you did, I'd be curious to hear about it. The number is 702-733-5968. But I think on this journey of life, I don't want to say I think. Almost all of us at some time or another, we may work hard to earn certain things, get certain things, and then there's a place we get to in our lives sometimes, and this I think starts to happen a little more as we get older sometimes, where suddenly those things they're not necessarily, suddenly you're working for them, not for you. In other words, they're not so much working for you, those things. You're working for them. You're working for that car payment. You're working to keep the car going. You're working to keep your house going. You're working this. You're working that. And suddenly it seems like we're spending all of our time just managing and trying to hold our life together. How many of you ever had that kind of a feeling? Where you're just trying to manage your life. You're just trying to hold on. And it seems like the more you try to hold on, the harder it gets. And there's so many teachings that deal with things like this. I'll tell you a funny story I heard once. This is kind of an East Indian story. There was this guy who decided he wanted to have a close relationship to God, but it would apply just as much to any tradition. And so he thought, I'm going to go out into the forest and I'll just meditate in very simple clothing, a loincloth, just have a little blanket over my shoulders, and I'll just keep my life simple. I won't get entangled with the world. I won't get entangled with all the burdens and struggles of this world. So he was out in the forest, and then at nighttime, what was happening is a little mouse would come by and start to gnaw on his loincloth. And he thought, well, wait a minute, this is not going to work. Next thing you know, I'm not going to have any loincloth left, and I'll be running around naked. I can't have that. So there's a farmer nearby, and he said, do you have a cat here by any chance that I could have? So keep away the mice? And the guy said, sure. So he took the cat with him, and everything was great. He kept the cat right there, and the cat would keep away the mice, and everything was good. But then he had a different problem. He had to have some milk for the cat. So he went back to the farmer and said, can I get some milk? And the farmer said, sure. So he went back and got some milk, and everything was good. But then pretty soon he kept going back and asking the farmer for milk. Finally, the farmer said, well, if you're going to keep asking for milk, I'm just going to give you a cow. The guy said, okay, I'll take a cow. So he takes the cow with him. And so he's got a cow and a cat. And then he goes back to the farmer again and says, this is a lot of work. I need to be able to take care of this cow. I'm going to have to... the farmer says, well, I have a good solution for you. He goes, I have a young daughter. You can get married, have children, and then the children will be able to help you maintain the land, to feed the cow, to give the cow milk, to give to the cat. And so pretty soon he got a wife, had children. And next thing you know, he was farming and raising a whole family. And one day he woke up and realized He thought he had a simple life. It actually had become extremely complicated. His simple desire to make life simple had actually made it extremely complicated. And that's kind of a silly story in a way. But if you look at our lives, think of how many times it's like that. I think, well, if I only had my house paid for, if I only had my car paid for, and then you maybe get fortunate and you were able to pay off your car, let's say. And then maybe you're going along and something happens. It happens all the time when people come to see me as an attorney. And they get in an accident or something. And suddenly, next thing you know, their car is totaled and they get a little check that's not a very big check and they have to get another car. Or maybe they're driving along and they need a new transmission in the car. Anything. So what started out to be simple still gets more complicated. Or there's just so many different things. You want to be successful. So you make your business grow a little bit. Or maybe a lot. And then next thing you know, you got to have a lot of employees. And then suddenly there's the strain and stress of making sure you have enough employees. And then if you don't have enough business for those employees, then you're stressed out. So it always looks like, and in this world, I will tell you, there's a name called for this condition. In this world, there's a disease, and it's called the disease of not enough. And in this world, we never really, the mind is set in a default setting. That wherever you are right now is not enough. Think about it in your own lives right now. How many of you think you have enough right now? Maybe some of you do, but most times people usually don't think like that. Most people think, well, I need to have this one thing more, or that one more thing. I need a new relationship, or I need to get rid of this relationship. I once heard it said that, I have to wait we're going to go to a break. This is Robert Sidell. This is the Gateway Show. When we come back, we'll be back in just a second. I'm working on an idea how to work on solutions where you don't see any answer. How to find a solution where you see no answer. So that's what we're working on tonight. And that's going to happen for you and I just by being part of this show. So stay tuned. This is Robert Sidell. I'll be back in just a moment. It's the Gateway Show. See, it's funny. I heard it said once about life that life is a game in which you want to be where you're not. Think about it. There's always something that needs to be changed in your life. It doesn't really matter how old you are. And new stories are always coming along. I just met a man today. I mean, I actually have known him for a while, but I saw him today down at the farmer's market. And I'd given him my book a few years ago. And he was very nice and talking to me today. And then he told me something I never knew about, which is quite interesting. About 3 years, he's at like 70 almost. Just about 3 years ago, he found out he had a daughter. He never knew he had a daughter. Turns out that when he was a young man, he'd been dating this woman for a couple of years. And then one day she just decided to leave him. Never said anything to him. Turns out she was pregnant at the time, but never told him. And left and went to another country. So 30 years go by, roughly. Let's just say 30 years. 40 years, maybe even. And one day he gets a call from a girl. She goes, "I'm your daughter." And what had happened was, one night, the father her stepfather was drunk, and he says, you're not our daughter. You're not my daughter. Of course, that was a big shock to her. She thought this guy was her father. He goes, "No, your mother was pregnant when I married her." So she asked her mother all about it, figured out who her dad was, took her 2 or 3 years to track him down, and suddenly he now finds out he had a child. So I asked him, here he's in his late 60s. I said, "So what's that like for you?" He goes, "It's made his whole life turn out. His life has turned out to be magical. He never would have guessed it. Here he had a child all this time." And I asked him, I said, "Did you have any issues of anger about that she never told you?" And as you might imagine, the answer is yes, he did. He had to work on that a lot. But she's since passed away too, the mother. So the interesting part about it is, had that stepfather had not told her that when he was drunk one night, while the mom was still alive, she never would have found out her father. But now the mom is gone. But guess what? It's a miracle of creation. My friend, who I just talked to today, he now has a daughter that he's very close to. Now he's thinking of moving to Europe so he can be near her. See, life has lots of things unfolding, has lots of surprises waiting for us. But you and I have to be open to those surprises, don't we? We have to be open to the miraculous possibilities of life. Answers where there seems to be no answer. Solutions where there seems to be no solution. Answers where there seems to be no answer. Solutions where they see no solution. We're going back on the radio right now. Good evening, my friends. This is Robert Sidell. You're listening to the Gateway Show on live every Sunday evening from 6 to 7 p.m. on the number one talk station here in Vegas and simulcasting on Facebook. So you can always listen to this show on Facebook even later on. Just go to Facebook, Robert Sidell. Also, you can go to YouTube and just type in Robert Sidell Gateway Podcast, Gateway Podcast, and you will find it. Put in Sidell Gateway Podcast. Any of that will pull it up. And you can listen to various shows that are being put in there. I'm starting to put them in now. So that's available on YouTube, on Facebook, or listening live on the radio. So here, my friend, I was just sharing this story with a friend. I just only heard this story today. That he goes his whole life, never got married, never had kids. He thought, and then he's like in his late 60s, and he finds out he has a daughter. And it's like a miracle for him, because something's giving him a second chance. It's giving him a new beginning in his life that he never knew was possible. So I want you to think about that. How many times is life like that? How many times is life like that, my friends? That a doorway can open. I'll give you another story sort of like that. Sue Brook. I've interviewed her on the show 3 or 4 times. And she's now traveling around the country. For those of you who remember this, about a year or so ago, I interviewed her. She got a job representing a company. I mean, not a company, a networking company. And it's a beautiful job. But anyway, I know her very well. Well, about 10 years ago now. About 10 years ago now, she got a call out of the blue. And somebody says, "I'm your sister." She says, "What? What are you talking about?" She goes, "Yeah, I'm your sister. I checked out DNA connections, and we have the same, almost overlapping DNA." So it turns out, in her story, that her mother had a relationship, we'll call it that. I think it was just before she got married. I'm not quite sure the whole story. But had a child, gave up the child for adoption. Then she got married to my friend's Sue's father, and then had Sue and the other siblings in her family. But she'd never mentioned that she'd had another child. But this other daughter, somehow through one of those DNA programs, found out that, hey, there's another woman out there who's almost the same DNA as me. So then it turns out they become best of friends. And Sue actually went up and lived up right near her newfound sister for years. Now Sue's traveling all around the United States. And like I said, I've been on the radio show several times. And I'll tell you something funny. I have a photograph to show you how little we understand about this life. The first day they met each other, they'd never met each other before. I have a picture of the clothes they wore. It's like they'd been picked out by somebody else to be exactly the same, all the way down to the shoes and everything. And they had distinctive shoes. I mean, it was really unbelievable. It reminds me how little we really understand about life. But they become very close friends, and their whole life changed. So if you feel like you're stuck, if you feel like there's no way forward, remember, now whenever you get to that place, you're in God territory. When you don't know what to do, where you don't know where to go, you're in God's territory. And that's a good place to be. When you understand that you of yourself don't understand, when you have a deep enough layer of humility to say, I don't really understand this world. When you can really let yourself feel that, I don't understand. Then a space opens up inside of you. Might just be a very small little doorway where light can start to come in. You see, if your mind is closed, if you think you know all the answers, even if you think you're sure there's no God, or you're sure God is this way or that way, if you have absolute certainty, then how's God going to work with you? How's God going to work with you to let you grow as a soul? So tonight, I invite any of you that are listening to just remember what Jesus said. When it seems like something's impossible. Again, Matthew chapter 19, verse 25 and 26. Again, read it back to you. When the disciples heard this, they were greatly astonished and asked, who can be saved? That was too hard. He'd been explaining what you have to do. He turned away the young rich man because the young rich man wasn't willing to give up everything to follow him, even though he was a good person, donated to his temple and everything. And they said, this is too hard, Jesus. Who could be saved then? And Jesus' answer was, with man it is impossible. Yeah, you're right, it is too hard. But with God all things are possible. And then I gave you a quote from Albert Einstein, another Jewish thinker. And he said, no problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it. Which to me, that's a simple way of saying only God can solve the problem. Because on our human level, there may not be any answer. But on the divine, the supernatural, there are answers. The supernatural can open doors that need to be opened. The supernatural can set up reality in ways that you get where you're supposed to get. I'm sure many of you have had stories like that, where suddenly the supernatural intercedes in your life. Let me tell you a story from my life like that. This is back when I worked for a big law firm that had many famous clients, including President Ronald Reagan. This is in downtown Los Angeles, before I came to Vegas. And I stayed late one night, and I'd parked my car in a parking lot, 4 or 5 blocks downtown, from where I worked. And the area I parked in really wasn't such a good area. And so I started walking towards my car. And I noticed that there was a man following me. One of these people that kind of mumbles and talks to himself. And he was following me, maybe 30 or 40 feet behind me. So I crossed the street. And this guy crossed the street too. I thought, oh, this is not good. And the direction I was walking is getting darker and more remote. I'm thinking, what's going to happen here? What am I going to do? And because I couldn't turn around and go back, so I'd be encountering this guy. And if I changed side of the street, he just kept following me. So I was thinking to myself, what am I going to do? And right at that moment, I was walking along, and there was a little tiny apartment building. It was probably 3 stories high, but it was like tiny though. And it was a little old hotel. But suddenly this car stopped, literally right beside me, actually. And there were like 6 people in the car. But they were all reveling in happiness. They were all celebrating. They were singing. They were just, they're out on the town having a great time. There were, I think, a group of Latin Americans. And I guess somebody was being dropped off at their apartment or that hotel, whatever it was. Anyway, they pulled up right next to me, right when I was there. And then we started making all this noise because they were having a good time. And they were getting out of the car, saying goodbye to each other and everything. And at that moment, the guy that was following me, when all those cars and people stopped right next to me, he just turned around and walked the other direction. And I was delivered from that problem. I couldn't have planned any of that. But what I want to encourage each one, and so that solved my problem. I got back to the car, and I was fine, and everything was good. So what I say to you is this: that's trusting that the infinite, the supernatural part of God's intelligence, that we cannot logically understand at all. How can the supernatural part of God, how can God take a person who has died and bring life to them? How's that possible? How is it possible, for those of you who believe this, that God was able to take Jesus, who died on a cross, and resurrect him back to life again? And I think there's extraordinary evidence that really happened. I'm going to give you, by the way, I use the term my wife uses. The Reader's Digest version, in other words, a very, very simple version is, of why I think it's true, beyond any faith issue, is that those original 12 disciples, all of them that witnessed this, went out and declared that truth, even though for them that was putting their life at risk, and in fact each one of their lives were eventually taken, but one. each one of them was killed. And each one of them stuck with that truth for the rest of their lives. And if somebody sticks with the truth, that's something they saw, not that they heard about, that they were taught about, that they saw, and they're willing to die as a testimony to that truth. Again, not as a faith, not as a teaching, because for that first group of people, they would have known the truth or falsity of it. If in fact they die for that and never backed out of it, and it cost them a lot of difficulty, struggle, and upset, then guess what? There's no human natural emotion that would cause a person to make up a story and then stick with it for the rest of their life, even to the point of death. So to me, just on a purely simplistic level, it's extremely probable. To me, there's no question that Jesus really was resurrected. And so even that one story, if you could accept that somehow God took a being that had been killed and brought him back to life. And there's other stories like that too in the Bible, and other stories too, even beyond that. But they brought him back to life. Well, that's not possible to the human mind. That's what Jesus was talking about. Hey, to man, that's impossible. But to God, it's not. So I want you to think tonight that wherever you are right now, whatever you're facing, or what we're facing collectively in the world, to us it's impossible. To you and I, it might be impossible. Might not be a simple solution, or any solution at all that we can see. But that doesn't mean that God... Oh, okay. Let us say thanks for the invite to call in. No problem. I think that would be fun, though. That would be fun. And I'd like to talk to you more about it, Linda. If nothing else, you can call me at my office. By the way, any of you listening are always welcome to call me at my office at 702-384-3847, or look me up at lasvegasattorney.com. Very easy to find that. And you can always call me. But, so when you and I are faced with the appearance, and I say appearance, of impossibility, just remember what Jesus said. Yeah, it looks impossible to man. It does. It does look impossible. Not only that it is impossible for man, but to God, all things are possible. And then if you need a little extra encouragement, just remember that Albert Einstein said, yeah, the solution you're going to get is not from your logical mind. It's from an answer higher than you knew, a level different than which the problem arose at. So this is Robert Sidell. We're going to go to a break. I'll be back in just a moment. You're listening to The Gateway Show. And we will also have Reverend Ernie and Janet with us here to share some prayers with us. Stay tuned. I'll be back in just a moment. So my friends, the secret for you and I is to remember we're not bad because we might doubt. It's not a sin to doubt. It's not a sin to question. It's not a sin to be unsure. It's not a sin to have fear and doubt. When Jesus was on the cross, what did he say? He goes, God, why did you abandon me? Why did you forsake me? So he showed right there his own human doubts at that moment. And that's good. Because if he could go through those doubts and still come out victorious, that means you can go through doubts and come out victorious too. Hold on a second. I got to start to get myself ready for Ernie and Janet. Just a second here. Okay, here we go. Oh, there we are. Okay, good. Hey, Ernie. Can you hear me, Ernie? Not yet. Ernie, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Robert. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Strong. Good. I think Janet will be on too in a minute, I hope.
Okay.
So my friends, wherever you are, you and I are at, let's just remember, for us it may seem impossible, but for God it's not. Kind of a neat thing to think, isn't it? To remember. For God, for man, it may be impossible, but for God it is not. So whatever you're facing, for you and I, it may be impossible, but for God, it is not impossible. So that's my invitation to each one of you to remind yourself of that. It may seem impossible to you. It may be impossible to you. But to God, it is possible. Because nothing is impossible to God. Oh, there's Janet. Good. Hey, Janet. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm looking, hold on. I got to get my thing situated here. I don't want to have to hold it, but maybe I will. Um, hold on. I got to figure out what I'm going to lean it on right now. Hold on. Oh, maybe that'll work. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you. Oops.
Oh, there we go.
There's some line.
I need
it's
my.
gone now.
What's that?
You have some line across your screen. I don't know what it is.
Oh, hold on.
Oh, no, you're okay now. I think you're okay.
I got to get my stand is what I need. So then it'll be, there we go.
Okay. All right. Hi, friends. We're coming back to the radio show right now. Good evening, this is Robert Sidell. Welcome you back to the Gateway Show on Sunday evening, 6 to 7 p.m. live. And tonight I'm focusing on the idea that we may be faced with situations that sometimes may seem impossible. And yet, if we keep trusting, the answers can come. And Janet, I even mentioned you earlier. You might not have heard that part. I said used to talk about it where you could get caught in a spin cycle. I think you call it. I know you told me about it once, where you feel like you're
in the dryer. I think of
cycle.
it as spinning around in the dryer.
Spinning around in the dryer, right? Where you're just sort of rethinking the same thoughts over and over again, and not getting anywhere, right?
And you collect more and more lint.
Oh, I didn't add that part in. I like that. More lint accumulating, getting nowhere fast, right? Getting nowhere fast.
Yep.
Well, that's a story I think we've all faced sometimes. We don't see a solution. We don't know the way out. We don't know what to do. And that's what this show is really about, is saying, and that's okay. Jesus recognized that. Great teachers have recognized that. There's lots of things in this life we don't have answers to. But that's where our faith in God has to come in. And we have to say, yes, it's true, I don't have the answer. But that's okay. Because though I don't have it, God does. That's really the answer. And then that lifts us out of that. Well, Reverend Ernie, why don't you share a prayer with us first before we go on?
All right, Robert, thank you. Okay, the topic of the prayer is there's always an answer, but sometimes we have to look at a higher level to find it. Lord, thank you for this blessed day. Guide us not to lose sight of heavenly realities while we apply ourselves diligently to the circumstances of our earthly lives. Enable us to hear your voice, follow your will, pursue your purpose, and trust our intuitive and instincts from within to seek answers to our challenges. Lord, we know your love for us is always available, and who hears our prayers and has a divine plan and purpose for us. We pray for others and for ourselves for forgiveness of our mistakes and errors and for healing. We pray that we are moved into your will every area of our lives so that our prayers reflect the will of your plan in us and the answers that we seek from within for all the challenges we experience, creating heaven on earth. And so it is. Amen.
Beautiful, Ernie. I love that. Very beautiful.
Thank you.
So, Janet, what do you have to share with us tonight?
So, I know what your topic was, and I listen always a while to see if it shifts any, if the topic shifts, around.
Right. No, I get it. Yeah.
Sometimes it shifts, it's okay.
It does. It does shift.
That happens. That happens. So, anyway, as I was listening to the show, I knew what I needed. I didn't know the exact lesson, but I have a lesson I'm going to read from the Course of Miracles, A Course in Miracles, and it's actually it's a beautiful one. It's lesson 286. The hush of heaven holds my heart today. Father, how still today, how quietly do all things fall in place. This is the day that has been chosen as the time in which I come to understand the lesson that there is no need that I do anything. In you is every choice already made. In you has every conflict been resolved. In you is everything I hope to find already given me. Your peace is mine. My heart is quiet and my mind at rest. Your love is heaven and your love is mine. The stillness of today will give us hope that we have found the way and traveled far along it to a wholly certain goal. Today we will not doubt the end which God Himself has promised us. We trust in Him and in ourself, who still is one with Him. Amen.
That's a good prayer, and it's like you said when you talked to me that time about the spin cycle, how we sometimes are facing a situation, and you can see it in the world, or you can see it in so many places, where you see patterns being repeated over and over again, or you find yourself in the same story. Oh, I faced this before many times in my life. To me, that's where if our hearts are open to God, God can supply an answer and begin to move us through it in ways we could never expand or predict or prepare for. So, in fact, Ernie, have you had situations like that in your life where you feel like God got you out of situations or through situations? Have you had anything like that in your life?
Yes, yes, of course. Yeah, yeah. Sometimes, I faced with some things like I'm stuck in it, and the answers are right within. And I had to have patience and pray, 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 have patience, and
And pray, pray,
sometimes it
pray
shows
again,
up
right?
unknowingly. Yes,
Unknowingly. That's what I found.
unknowingly shows
Just
up.
just one day you suddenly realize you're free. What about you, Janet? Have you had that kind of story in your life?
Of course, that's why I told the dryer thing. Yeah, and you have to get out of the spin because your mind's in the spin. So you have to quiet your mind, whatever that takes to do, even if it's for a second. And in that second, something happens that you're not even aware of. And then it can be something simply as you're driving and you see a sign that you swear was never there before in a billboard or something, and it's your answer,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah.
Haven't you had that happen? Like out of the blue, there's the answer, and you're like, oh, I bet they just put that billboard up there. And it was probably there the 2 days before, a week before, you never noticed it.
When I was coming to Vegas to interview for a job, it's like back in 1983 or whatever it was, I still remember, I see it like today. I was walking through the airport parking lot. I looked over the license plate, it says, be in Vegas. And I just thought somehow that's what I needed to see at that moment. And I came over and interviewed for the job. And it turns out if I waited one more day, the job would have been filled. But because I didn't wait one more day, I got a job offer, came to Vegas, and my whole life changed. I've been here now for like 40 years. So ended up meeting you and Ernie and lots of other wonderful people that have become beautiful lifelong friends. Well, you know what? We're just about out of time. So, yep, there we go. In fact, I'll say this, Ernie, that's how you got out of India, but we could talk about that at a different time, right? But that's how you
Okay.
came here from India. Same kind of thing, right? Couldn't have planned
Right.
it.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
All right, my
Sure.
friends, we're coming to the end of our show. Let's remember, God is real. For that reason, miracles are real. Debbie Hall says 45 years for her. She came here 45 years ago. And by the way, Linda said she really appreciated your prayers, both of yours. So may God
Thank you.
bless everybody listening. We pray in the name of Jesus Christ and all that is good for all people listening, wherever you are, now and through eternity, that good things come to you and we fulfill God's purpose for us. And so it is. You guys take care of yourselves. Remember, God is good. Miracles are real. Have a great week. This is Robert Sidell. See you guys later.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a great week.
You too. You too. All right, Janet. Good too.
Bye
All right. Well,
bye.
listen, you guys take care of yourselves. You take care. It's great.